the DARE program. The Board of Selectmen, I think it was Stephen, several years back, made a motion, and the board adopted it, that $10,000 be added to our overtime budget to fund the DARE program. Because we had, at that time, lost, that's one of those cutbacks I talked about, where the federal government took back money from successful programs, and the board recognized that several years back, and added $10,000 to our overtime budget, but have since taken away $184,000, so that's moved. However,
We left the 10 in there.
so, it takes about 250 hours of overtime per year for us to, actually, it takes about 350 hours of overtime, and we're funded at about 200 hours. So that was an increase in that particular category, to bring it up to what it's exactly costing the department. And staff meetings was a category I put in last year. It just makes common sense that, the police chief sit down with his command staff of lieutenants and sergeants and detectives on a monthly basis, as any executive would of his or her command staff, to review what's happening in the department, do problem solving, and so on. So what you see is an accurate reflection of what's taking place in our overtime. And the other major increase in an existing category was training. Historically, we were funded at 2,800 hours of overtime hours for training in the past. And that is, and I don't know if anybody's ever had a chance to read what we submit under our program budget, but there are three major areas in which a police department can be sued. One is lack of supervision, one is negligent hiring, and the other is lack of training. And there are any number of current and old Supreme Court, appellate court cases that are cited in that document, which is in our budget submission, that says if you don't train to firearms, if you don't train to use of force, if you don't train to equipment used, if you don't train to the policies and procedures you have in place, and something does occur, then the community is placed in a position of liability. The other part of this is that we have a brand new command staff. We have 2 new sergeants, 2 new lieutenants. They have to be trained to perform in those positions. So based upon my assessment of trying to diminish the risk to the police department and the community, I asked for an increase in our training back to that 2,800 hours, and that would sustain us through this year. And then maybe next year we can reduce that down a little bit. But there's mandated trainings that there through collective bargaining. There are mandated trainings through required by state law and by the federal government with incident command and NIMS and so on. So that's why I increased that. Also, by contract, we have our EMT program, and that's an absolute drain. It costs the police department about 1,800 hours from our overtime budget last year, and we only budgeted for 836 hours, so that was a huge impact. I did sit down, and Greg and I are dealing with a grievance right now, but I did put in some significant controls on EMT training, putting a cap on the hours. Right before it was uncapped, and not controlled very well. So there is a cap, and we are controlling that. But in reality, just to meet the obligation of the contract, it's about 1,000 hours of training per year.
Hey, just to clarify some things here, because either I missed something, or I thought you said 600 hours and then 500 hours. Under the additional request in the operations area for personal services, some of this was to make up for overtime that was taken out of the budget in the past.
That's correct.
The rest of it is for
Dispatches.
new programs.
Yes.
Hey, help me clarify what portion is what.
Let me see. I got it written down someplace here. I think it's $143,000 thereabouts.
Is the overtime?
No, it's dispatches.
141,360.
Yeah. That is for 4 full-time and 1 part-time dispatcher. And
Okay.
recognizing what I had spoke about earlier, that right now we've taken a patrol officer off the street to supplement the other patrol officer or sergeant that's working out of dispatch. This would provide us coverage, not 24 hours a day, but about 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and allow that patrol officer to get back on the street again. And that program would emulate the program in Reading. That would satisfy a couple of needs, and that's explained in the program budget, portion of the police department submission. And that would satisfy a couple of needs. First of all, to get that patrolman back on the street again. And they would be required to, based upon the Reading model, to do a lot of our data input that takes other patrolmen off the street to do that. And that also be monitoring ourselves during an arrest period. We would train them as cell monitors, and they would perform that service of that 15-minute check. Now, those of you who took the tour of the police department know that the cell block is located on the lower level of the department, and that 15-minute cell monitor mandatory requirement requires the person at dispatch to leave dispatch, which is the 911 center, and there's a 22-second state standard on that to answer the 911 phone. So they have to leave dispatch, go downstairs, pass by, and check a prisoner in one of our lockups. They have to hit a watchman's station with their alarm key fob to indicate that they've checked it, and then they go back upstairs to dispatch. And that puts that officer at risk, puts the community at risk for not being able to respond to a 911 call in a timely fashion. So dispatchers would take on that responsibility while they're in there. So there'd be two people in the station at that time. There would be a police officer and a dispatcher, and one or the other would perform that cell monitoring function. And that other auxiliary officer that was coming in providing auxiliary support would go back on the street and under patrol. So that's reflected by $143,000.
Wasn't it anticipated in the construction, in the plan of that building, that would be the case, and there was supposed to be some kind of an auxiliary dispatch station downstairs?
Yeah, it wasn't so much. It was a philosophical idea that we would put a third public safety answering point, 911 station, at the booking area in the basement. And I traveled to the State Emergency Telecommunication Board hearings 3 times to present our case to them. And basically what they said, if somebody dies as a result of their inability to answer 911, come back and see us. And that's a quote.
Okay, so they didn't approve the...
They would not approve it.
Okay.
So that's basically our personnel. You know, we're level funded insofar as staffing. We're not looking to increase sworn staff. We've got a proposal in there under the additional services column of $143,000 for 4 full-time, 1 part-time dispatcher. Whether that happens or not, that's within the purvey of this austere group and the town's ability to fund that.
Excuse me, Chief, what kind of discussions have you had with Chief Harris in relation to centralized dispatching? Because, I mean, we've got similar issues in relation to staffing levels with the fire department, and obviously if we can centralize dispatching, you know, that obviously frees up additional people to go out on
I think
ambulance runs.
It's a phenomenal idea that could be looked at in the future. However, something happened along the way. That dispatch area is significantly smaller as it exists right now. There isn't enough space in there that will accommodate a fire, all the equipment that's required for a fire dispatch.
I thought when we were designing the building,
that's right,
one of the key components we were talking about was to avail ourselves of the opportunity at this particular time.
I think all they did was run a chase, I believe.
To do that going forward, at least. Rather say we have a brand new facility that can't house us now.
I can't give you an adequate response. I think what happened, and it's my best guess, is that if you look at the equipment room in back of the dispatch was supposed to be deeper. And I believe that if it had been deeper, it could have housed and wrapped around additional dispatch services. But what happened was, as they began to try to fit technology in there, it began to push the walls for dispatch out and take away space. And as it is right now, there is so much equipment and technology, your servers and your CCTV security system panels and telephone panel, 911 stuff, radio stuff, that they've actually had to expand that room, and they had to take away a space at the back of the building, and part of the radio equipment is now housed in the back of the building, and they had to run extra. It's the design of the building didn't keep up with the technology requirements that were put into the building, and I think that's the bottom line.
When 911 call comes in, where does it come in?
To the police department.
To the police department. So, whether it's a fire call or a police call.
That's right.
So if you're dispatching 911, it all's coming into the same place
Yeah,
anyway.
but Stephen, there are other, the fire department, we have a number of representatives here from the fire that could probably better answer. They have alarm arrays that are part of their dispatch. They have different radio systems that go to their medical control facilities, regional radios, and
Oh, no, I understand that, but the initial call that comes into our 911 system, comes in through the police department.
That's correct.
Dispatch area. Then we would just flip it over to the firefighter on the
Yeah,
desk.
it's a simple transfer. It transfers back, yeah.
Well, I think that it was a goal. It's still something that we need to look forward to. I agree with you that it's something that needs to be planned out. It may require additional changes to the facility there. But it's not something we should just say can't be done.
No, I think, and my intention was to submit this more as a table setup for future discussion too. I think it's something that's absolutely needed by this community, whether it's a joint dispatch with police and fire, have to be hammered out through negotiations with the collective bargaining groups. There's probably some way to redesign that facility to accommodate that, but I wouldn't suspect it costs a heck of a lot of money to do it. But this was designed as a table setter. Listen, we have to begin to plan this in earnest for the future. It certainly gives food for thought, and it's accomplished what we hope to accomplish, to generate some discussion and know that we have to move in that direction in the future.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as far as the civilian dispatch, this is something that the board has talked about off and on over the years, but couldn't muster enough support amongst the board members initially, majority of the board to go along with it. I've been on the minority side of the board for a long time, been advocating for it, because again, it puts more police officers and more firefighters on the street. It makes them available to meet the public safety needs.
Yep.
Depending upon what the...
There are some effective, and you have pure pro and cons throughout the area too. You have some people that are zealots that say that the system works very well, a joint dispatch, and others,
We also have an awful lot of a number of communities that are looking at regionalized, centralized
That's right.
dispatching for a regionalized basis.
That's right.
Which again, from an economies of scale and
that makes sense.
public need,
Same thing with jails. So there are a lot of areas that are looking at centralized jail facilities for, it's just that it wasn't here for us at this time. So
Ed, just so that I make sure I have this straight in my head, in your additional request under personal services, the $143,000 of that 382 is for additional personnel, correct?
that's correct.
And the rest of it is basically overtime that has been removed from the budget over a period of time.
That's
To cover
correct.
the things that you talked about.
That's right.
The purchase supply request of an additional